pair of hikers from Rhode Island have been rescued after getting stuck in treacherous terrain on Mount Washington.
At least one hiker expressed they were feeling symptoms of hypothermia. Officials tell us the hikers were brought to safety around 10 p.m. and thankfully, there were no injuries.
This was no drill, but a real-life emergency deep in the White Mountains.
Broadcasting from the Woodpeckers studio in the great state of New Hampshire, welcome to the Sounds Like a Search and Rescue podcast, where we discuss all things related to hiking and search and rescue in the White Mountains of New Hampshire. Here are your hosts, Mike and Stomp.
Okay, and I'm going to hit record here, so we are good to go. All right, Stomp, so number 19.
Oh, yeah. It's that in-between age, huh? Nothing going on with 19.
What were you doing when you were 19?
Just capitalizing on everything I could do when I was 18. That's about it. Nothing special.
Yeah, it's an indescript birthday.
Yeah.
So anyway, show 19.
I was yearning to be 21, actually.
Yeah, exactly. Trying to score your fake IDs.
Yes.
Stomp, I'm doing some White Mountain history, so you get to use your friend's cut about like, this is White Mountain history.
Let's dive into some White Mountains history, shall we?
Have you ever heard of the first brew pub in the White Mountains?
No, I have not. No.
You haven't? All right, well, we've got our friend Steven here that's going to be talking about brewing and beer, so I figured I would share a little bit of White Mountain history here. So, have you ever heard of the English Jack, the Hermit of Crawford Notch?
No, it's new by me. He wasn't a Puritan or anything like that.
No, he was. He sold beer to all the tourists that came up to Crawford Notch. So this guy it's an interesting story. He was born in like the 1820s, 1830s, in England, and he was one of these vagabond type of sailors that had spent a lot of his life sort of sailing and getting into trouble on the ocean, but he ended up settling in Crawford Notch in the late 1800s and lived until like the early 1900s. It's a real guy, and he had a house near the Crawford House in the late 1800s, early 1900s, and he called the house the Ship because he was a sailor. So he would say, like, come to the ship.
For beer?
Back in the, yeah. So back in the 1800s, like, I think logging was still in play, but like the Crawford Notch region was becoming like more of a tourist area. So this guy, apparently he worked for the railroads, the P&O Portland, and I forget the name of the other line, but it's basically the Portland Railroad. And eventually he settled in the Notch, built his own little cabin, and then he was basically like the first tourist attraction. So he would put signs up by the train depot in Crawford Notch, and he would say, come visit English Jack, and he would sell, I think, postcards for tourists. But his big thing was he would make beer. Yeah. And you could go, after you got off the train, you could go to the ship and you'd have your beer.
So it was like
it's pretty cool.
Like trail magic for through trainers. I think what that is Oregon, right?
I don't think so. It's something else. I was reading. I'll put it in the show notes. It's something else. It's not Oregon. But this guy, he used to make beer out of like roots and stuff. Steven, have you ever made beer using roots?
No, I haven't. But yeah, lots of beer was used or made with like ginger root or maple syrup. I was actually watching a video the other day, like Civil War rations, maple syrup was included as maple molasses, so that the guys could make their own beer.
Yeah. So my guess is that he was probably doing something similar, but his deal was that he would, I think, hunt during like the fall and then sort of hunker down in the winter, and then during the tourist season he would be brewing and getting as many people to visit his house, which was called the Ship, as he could. And he wrote a book. So I'll actually attach the link to the book in the show notes, but it tells his whole life story. So when he was like 12 years old, his parents died. So he's like walking on the docks in England, and he meets this young girl. The young girl is like, I'm lost, I can't find my dad. And English Jack was like, I'm lost, I have no parents. So she took him to meet her father. Her father, his name was Bill, was a captain on a ship. He took English Jack and taught him how to be a sailor. And unfortunately, they got shipwrecked years later. Bill died. Jack actually came back, and the dying wish for Bill was to take care of my daughter, whose name was Mary, and Bill's wife. So English Jack gets back to England. He sees Mary. She's older now. He falls in love with her. So he takes the rest of his money, and he says, I'm going to send you to school for a year so you can finish school, and then we're going to get married. Unfortunately, the wife had died, so Mary was all on her own. So basically, at first, Mary saved Jack. Then Jack's father died, and Jack was able to save Mary. Jack went off to do another sailing deal to get money so that he could marry Mary. And by the time he got back, she had died of some illness in school. So this guy had like the worst life ever, or the worst luck ever. But eventually he made his way over to the U.S. because he was like, I can't stay here anymore because I miss my Mary. He made his way to the U.S., and he was working on the railroads, came up to Crawford Notch, and he became like this sort of legendary guy known as the Hermit of Crawford Notch.
How'd you discover this?
I got to give credit to, I was listening to a podcast, as a matter of fact, so I'll give a shout out to this crew.
Shame.
It's actually a good podcast. It's called New England Legends. And they did a segment on it. And then I just did a little bit of research. But this guy, he spent like a lot of winters in Crawford Notch. Eventually, he got older, and he moved in with a family in Twins to Twins County, or Twins. I don't know, what's the name of the town? Twins?
Twin Mountain.
Twin Mountain, yeah. So he moved up there with like this family that hosted him for years, and there's photos online, and the guy looks like a real like interesting character. So he was the first guy to do brewing and beer in the White Mountains.
That's fascinating. So I do know a little bit about his nickname. Was there any information about how he got that name? Jack Vial? V-I-A-L?
I don't know. I think that was just his name. And then the whole deal with him being a hermit was he was apparently pretty outgoing. So I think it was a whole like tourist thing. So I think he was like a very early version of
Steve
the Wolfman
Rodriguez
that you get at Clark's Trading Post.
I thought you were going to say Steve. An early version of Steve.
Well, yeah, Steve too. Yeah. So,
one and the same.
It's possible.
Yeah. But I wanted to give a little bit of White Mountain history to talk about like the first brewer, and even though this guy was labeled as a hermit, he's not really a hermit. We have to. We're going to do an episode at some point. We got to do an episode on that hermit guy that was a real hermit up in Maine. I think it was the North Pond or South Pond hermit. We'll do a show on him. That guy's an interesting character. But
yeah,
English Jack.
Mm-hmm. Awesome story. It's good stuff. The history around here is really neat.
Yeah, it is, and we'll keep throwing some stuff in as we get through. I gotten some feedback. People like the history segment, so. Mm-hmm. All right. So tonight we're happy to introduce our very first sponsor. So we're here with Rek-Lis Brewing. So we're excited to sit down with Stephen Rodriguez, who is a representing Rek-Lis, and he also volunteers his time with the PEMI Search and Rescue team. So I have a lot of questions about brewing and beer in general, and I'm sure that Stephen has all the answers for us. So we're excited to start the show off with that segment, and then later in the show, we're going to be joined by Stomp's friend Brad, who was part of a recent rescue that occurred near Franconia Falls. And Brad was hiking and came upon a seriously injured gentleman and was able to activate his emergency beacon. So we're going to ask him about that experience. And then we're also going to talk a little bit more just about general hiking with Brad. So I'm very excited to talk about brewing and search and rescue tonight. So we'll get going here. So I'm Mike.
And I'm Stomp. Let's get started.
Very good, Stomp.
Hey, Mike, what are you drinking tonight?
I'm not drinking anything yet. I'm waiting to get my beer shipment, or I'm waiting to go buy some beer from Rek-Lis Brewing. So I'm going to talk to Stephen later in the show to find out where I can get some.
Ah, yes, that's very coy. Well, somebody put a growler in the back of the bed of my truck last night, so I'm actually drinking my favorite stout in New England, if not the world. It's carry-out stout, and we'll get into that for sure. So that is a Rek-Lis brew, and Steve, you were the mastermind behind that, right? Pretty much.
Yeah, I was. Yeah, it was the perfect. It was the perfect combination of my favorite job and my favorite hobby.
Favorite hobby being?
Well, hiking, but I guess more specifically, search and rescue. Yeah.
Yeah, that's awesome. And what are you drinking tonight, my friend?
I'm drinking the same thing. I brought home a growler of the carry-out stout for myself.
So good, so good. Steven Rodriguez is here. I have known Steve for what now? Probably like 4 years, Steve? About 3 or 4 years?
Yeah, I think going on 4 years. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah,
sure.
We've basically shared a lot of trail time together on different missions throughout the Whites. And when you spend that much time on trail with people, you get to chat about things. And we discovered, different things about each other, and the fact that Steve is into brewing and just EDM music, and I'm a big EDM fan. And some of these conversations started way back, like in terms of maybe like, hey, how about doing some EDM at Rek-Lis and things like that. So there was like these early seeds of trying to do some things at Rek-Lis or whatever, but it never panned out. Sure enough, this podcast seemed to have maybe opened some doors, and recently we started doing some research about sponsors and this and that, and I believe I reached out to you and said, hey, Steve, what do you think about this idea? And that's what got the ball rolling, and here we are. So Rek-Lis, from what I had always heard, the brewery itself is always very receptive to new artists and just supportive of new talent. I've been to the brewery itself, and it seems like a very eclectic crowd, and just their posting online, it just gives you this vibrant sense of what's going on there. So it's really exciting to have Rek-Lis actually step up and say, yeah, man, we love what you're doing, and we'd love to support you, and we'll see what happens from there. But so welcome aboard, first sponsor. Here we are.
Yeah, totally glad. Yeah, I've been wanting to get you performing at Rek-Lis for a while, and you're right. We do all types of music there. Depending on the season, is like, they can do 3 or 4 different nights where they're going to have music, and it's a huge range, whether it's just acoustic or last summer or the summer before, we used to have like a bunch of punk bands come. There was this one band where the lead vocalist would like spit in his bass guitarist's face. They were really hardcore. So we kind of run the gamut. And then we do trivia on Thursdays.
That's
so
awesome.
Wait a minute. Hold on, Stephen. I got questions here. So this is a punk band. So the lead singer spit in the bass player's face?
Yeah, I didn't see this happen, but I heard about it from Ian, who's one of our owners and our head brewer. It's like his favorite local band. Yeah. I don't think they're a band anymore, but
I would think not. They probably got into a fight. So all right, so I gotta find out the name of this band later, but we don't want to expose them yet. But
I'll message it to you.
Yeah, that's very interesting.
Oh man, that's too funny. Can you tell us a little bit about first? Let's start with Rek-Lis. Tell us a little bit about the brewery and how you got involved, and just a little bit of history there.
Rek-Lis opened in 2016 on a back street in Bethlehem. Ian and Marlena, who are the owners, they were brewing in their shed in the backyard.
Same location?
And they would serve... No, different location, just down the street, like a half mile or so down the street from where they are now. Mm-hmm. They'd open up on like weekend nights, and they'd sell growlers, and they could sell tasters. I started out as a customer. I was there the first night they opened, filled my growler, walked down the driveway, turned around, walked back up. I had to buy a t-shirt. Ian made a joke that I was their first repeat customer. And we were fast friends after that. I'd come and hang out, drink beer, got to know them. Then less than a year later, it got a really great reception. Mm-hmm. So they decided they needed a bigger space. They bought this place down on Main Street. And at the time I was working doing carpentry and woodworking, and they asked if I wanted to come and help renovate So I started doing that nights and weekends. Then the job started to wrap up, and Ian said, "Hey, you and I work really well together. We get along. Why don't you come on and I'll teach you how to brew?" And that kind of started everything for me.
So it's been a few years now. It's like you guys are rocking and rolling. You have a full menu. The place is always packed. We have a series of questions. I think, Mike, you're going to run through some of these questions, but one of the questions I do want to hit on is how you guys fared over the last year and a half. We got to touch upon that because that's an interesting side story too.
Yeah, it was touch and go at first. Nobody really knew it was going to happen. The brewery closed. I think they closed doors for a little while. I was in a position where I was like, where I told them, I said, I don't really need to work right now. I can go home. I'd rather give my time to somebody else. So they were doing takeout and delivery, just enough to keep the doors open, really, keep a few people employed. As soon as we were able to open our doors again, everything just came flooding back in. Beer was selling faster than we could make it. We started distributing around the same time. We started selling cans around the state, which was a really good source of revenue for us. We've already been able to upgrade our canning system just because of the demand. So during the whole lockdown, at first it was a little touch and go, but the quote unquote aftermath, it's been a big jump. There's been a lot of demand.
Now, your brewing or your distribution, is it strictly New Hampshire, or are you guys wider into different states?
Yeah, right now, I don't know a whole lot about the legal side of it, but I know that because of our licensing, we're not able to self-distribute outside of the state of New Hampshire.
Right.
But we can distribute anywhere in New Hampshire. And so Jules is our distributor at the brewery and works super hard. She drives all over the place, making deals, making calls, getting our beer wherever people will take it, and really knocking it out of the park. We're pretty far flung now.
That's awesome.
Yeah, and I'll get the list of locations where you can where the audience can go to pick up some product. I definitely want to find out. Like, I'm in the North Conway area most of the time, so I'm sure there's got to be some locations there. But I'll post that info on the show notes when we push the show out.
Totally. Yeah, I know right off the top of my head, right at Grant's over there on Hurricane Mountain Road.
Oh yeah. Nice, I can go there. So how long? So when you were doing carpentry, and then you transitioned into sort of apprenticing on brewing. Right. How long did it take you to train to get up to speed where you feel like you could start making your own product?
Yeah, it took me. Well, Ian's a really good teacher. He's a really good teacher, and it's really just a guess. I have a pretty bad memory, but I think it was less than a year until I started, actually brewing. It's kind of like the difference between knowing how to drive a car and knowing how a combustion engine works.
Yeah.
You can drive before you know exactly what you're doing.
That's awesome.
so I was to the point where I could drive the car after like 6 or 8 months, something like that.
Yeah. Now, do you have like a particular type of beer that you are better at making than others, or did he try to train you across all different types of beer?
When Rek-Lis first opened, we pretty much did exclusively like American ale styles, a lot of IPAs, some stouts, some porters, pale ales. And it wasn't until a little bit later in the brewery's development that we started to branch out and do some lager styles, some European styles. We still brew one beer today. It's a Kolsch, like a German style that we call Culture Shock, because it was shocking that we finally started brewing something other than American ales.
Nice. Now, were you before you got into working with Rek-Lis, were you into beer, and I call them beer snobs? Were you like deep into sort of the craft brewing culture?
I wasn't deep. I was dipping my toes in the water. I started deciding that I wasn't going to buy beer from away as often. I was going to try to drink local. And a former teacher of mine actually tipped me off to a Facebook post saying that, hey, there's a brewery opening up in Bethlehem. And I started following it after that. Then after I got involved, then I guess I got pretty deep into it.
Yeah, it's interesting how you got hired too. So I'm in my day job, I'm in recruiting, so I think about hiring quite a bit. So you weren't knocking on doors trying to apply to be, an employee at a brewery. You were basically went there as a customer, started a relationship, ended up finding out that, there was a need there to do some other work. And then through, your work ethic and the relationship you continue to build, the opportunity opened up for you that, otherwise you probably, if you were going to just put your resume in for different craft brewing companies, it would have been a crapshoot for you to even find something, right?
Yeah, I had no idea that it was really something I wanted to do until Ian asked me. And you're absolutely right. Normally, anybody with a resume like mine, they might have been asked to, come and work in the warehouse or something like that. It's since it's such a niche field, there's not a whole lot of opportunity, especially for somebody with no previous training. I got really, really lucky, I guess.
Yeah, and it's interesting. So me and Stomp have talked about this a few times, but I sort of I was thinking about this show, and I'm like, I feel like I'm a bit of a time traveler when it comes to drinking beer, because I stopped drinking. I was in college in the 90s. I drank a ton of beer, but it was always like Busch Light and whatever crappy beer we could find. And then I stopped drinking in the late 90s, early 2000s, and I just picked it up probably like 3 or 4 years ago. So for me, like my whole life, I was always just like pick between Coors Light, Bud Light, Busch Light. And now when you go to the liquor store, I started drinking IPAs, and I do enjoy them. But can you talk a little bit about like what the hell happened in the 20 years that I stopped drinking, that we went from these big breweries into everything being so down to like small craft brewing companies?
Yeah, the beer that was commercially available back then was really all, like you're saying, the Budweisers, the Coors Light, they were all lagers. That's what all the big companies were making. So the other styles, the IPAs and whatnot, weren't really commercially available. So home brewers started brewing them themselves. Then the home brewers got really good at brewing them. Then the home brewers started selling it. People got into it, and it kind of exploded from there. Yeah,
it's very interesting. Like it was. We talk about, we do talk about beer at the beginning of most shows, and I'm always trying like new types of beer. So I'm excited to try Rek-Lis out, but I'm just kind of curious to get your take. But it's I can't think of that many industries that have so significantly changed over the last 20 years. I mean, it's crazy the selection now when you go into these liquor stores.
I think that social media probably adds another layer to it as well. Just kind of like hiking in the whites, where 10 years ago, the trails were pretty much empty compared to they are now. But then Facebook came around, Instagram came around, everybody started seeing their friends out, hiking the Ridge or hiking Mount Wash. And they were like, oh, dang, I really want to do that. And I think the same things happen with craft beer. People are seeing on Facebook all these really cool brews, all these really cool breweries. Their friends are drinking all this fancy stuff, and they want to get into it. And it's really easy to find good beer now because there's so many craft breweries and because it's so prevalent on social media.
Yeah, it is. It's been an interesting journey back into drinking for me, so I'm enjoying it. But I'm only like one beer a night. That's about my max. I don't get too crazy. I'm not going to be spitting in anybody's face, I don't think.
Nice.
So now, so Stephen, with the hiking angle, have you been hiking for a long time? Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, I grew up hiking. I grew up in the area, so my parents used to take us up to Sugarloaf, Zealand Falls, Willard, Lonesome Lake, all that stuff. And in high school, I was we had an outing club where we'd do hikes every now and again. Went away from home for a couple of years, came back, and just got right back into hiking.
Have you ever needed any potential rescues, any close calls?
The closest I think I ever was last winter out in the Randolph Town Forest. I planned a pretty decent loop out by Pond of Safety, and in the winter out there, it's not super well traveled. So I was walking through pretty deep snow, and I got to a point after the pond of safety. I was like 70% of the way through my loop, and I couldn't find the next blaze. So I just kind of would walk back to my blaze, pick a different line, and try to find the next one. And there was a good period of time where I couldn't find it, and I was walking through like really deep snow, and I thought, well, gosh, I have to either follow my tracks all the way back, or I have to find this next blaze. I started to get a little bit worried, but of course, eventually found it under a pine bough and continued on my way.
Nice. Now, I was just out there. I just did the Ice Gulch loop. So that's the same. You're talking about. That's the same area, right?
Yeah, I think it's on the other side of the Randolph Town Forest. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, you weren't doing the Ice Gulch in the winter, were you?
No, I was. It's funny. I was actually listening to the episode where you were talking about the Ice Gulch, and I might go out there this weekend.
Yeah, it's definitely worth it. But I'm just trying to imagine like doing that in winter. Stomp, that may be an adventure we'll have to try. I don't think too many people get out there.
Oh yeah, absolutely up to it for sure.
So Stephen, when did you get into search and rescue?
It was. It must have been shortly before I went on at Rek-Lis. I, in high school, being a hiker and whatnot, I would always read about search and rescue. Or not always. I would sometimes read about search and rescue events in like the newspaper or something. This was before Facebook and all that stuff, and Northwood's Law.
Yeah.
So it was few and far between when I would hear the stories. So it kind of made search and rescue seem like this group of backwoods elites.
That's how I fell into it. Same thing, just media stories and like, who are these epic, like
exactly,
amazing, like Marvel superheroes.
It was so mysterious. It was so drawing, and I happened to have a mutual friend of Gordy's. Gordy's, I think, one of the founding members of PEMI.
Mm-hmm.
So I happened to casually mention interest one day to this mutual friend who said, "Oh, hey, I'll throw you this guy's email address." I corresponded with Gordy for a little while, and then I signed up and joined the team.
And the rest is history.
Very cool. Yeah. Now, were you on before Stomp joined?
No, Stomp was there when I joined. I'm not sure for how long, but...
You must have been disappointed thinking you're going to deal with all these elite people when you meet Stomp.
He's an impressive looking dude. No, I was like, shit, can I keep up with this guy?
Yeah, exactly.
And we know that's not the case, right? You blow past me every time we're on the trail. I think the last time was Georgiana Falls, right? That was when my hip was like really aching, and this dude blasts past me like 100 miles an hour.
You got to cut yourself slack with your hip, man.
Now, as far as hiking goes, are you like, so I'm admittedly, I'm a big list geek, and I'm always like tracking my my progress against the White Mountain Guide or redlining or whatever you want to call it. So are you into that level of hiking, or you just kind of do what you want to do?
I mean, I'm conscious of things like the lists, but I don't keep track of it very well. I did a whole lot of repeats before I finally finished my 48. Like you said, I kind of just did what I wanted to. After that, I'm really more interested in backpacking, spending the night, doing a couple of days if I can, whenever my schedule allows.
As far as, long term, do you think that you'll ever do any of the sort of the long trails through hiking, long, Appalachian Trail, CDT, anything like that?
I always thought that I would, but then last summer I did the Coas Trail. It took me 9, almost 10 days, and for a little less than half of it, I did it with friends. So it was nice, a nice shared experience. But the half that I spent alone wasn't as fun. So I don't think I could spend 4, 5, 6 months on the trail. I'm happy with a week, 5 days, something like that.
Yeah, that's something I've always been curious about, because I haven't really ever done anything more than like 2 nights. Then the Coas Trail has got to be the perfect trail to kind of test yourself out, because it's just at that level where it's long enough where you're like, all right, I'm going to get a real taste of this, but it's not so long that it's insane. So,
yeah, man, you got to try the Coas Trail. It's awesome.
Yeah, I was in Nash Stream Forest 2 weekends ago. I did the Sugar Loaf. I can't remember if I covered this in the podcast. I won't get into too many details, but I think I got to do some updates on hiking. But I love that area, like the Nash Stream Forest and like the Percy Peaks area, and that whole hiking behind Percy Peaks is awesome. So yeah, and I've done Kilkenny, so I've done like big sections of it, but it is interesting to me to maybe string together the whole hike at some point.
Those are my favorite parts. Kilkenny Ridge up into Nash Stream Forest. At some point after Nash Stream, there's like a solid day, maybe two, where you're walking on like ATV trails. I wasn't crazy about that, but yeah, the parts that you mentioned, those are my favorite.
Yeah, and I know I just saw that they put out an announcement that they're putting out new I think maps and a mileage book for the Cohosh Trail. So I think the days of that thing being like a hidden gem are going to be in the past, because more and more people are hearing about it. We're clearly not helping, so sorry.
You're right. Nobby just finished it too.
I did grit my teeth a little bit when you were blowing up that stealth site on Kilkenny Ridge Trail.
Yeah, I'm sorry, but I don't think anybody's going to. You got to be savvy to find it. So hopefully no one will figure it out. But honestly, to get out there is hard because you got to go through the weeks. Although you can get at it from Cabot, but hopefully not too many people will go through there.
Yeah, and there's really not a lot of water out there until you hit that spot.
Yeah, exactly. All right, perfect. So I did want to talk a little bit about just sort of the environment at Rek-Lis. So you talked about live music and whatnot, but what's the environment like there? If is it dog friendly? Is it kid friendly? What's a typical night there? Is it more of a restaurant, or is it more of a sort of a chill hangout place?
Yeah, we've really got something for everybody. We do dogs outside. We've got a lot of outdoor seating. There's a couple of big decks. We've got seating in the garden. We have a field next door. We have cornhole and all sorts of stuff. Yep. Yeah, it's a blast. So, whether you're just getting off the golf course, or you're just getting off the Franconia Ridge, or you're taking the kids out for a bite to eat, a lot of people say that the food is just as good as the beer. Depends on which department you ask. But there really is something for everybody. It's not exclusive. Very welcoming course. It's really cozy. There's a lot of wood and stuff inside. The mood lighting. What's a brewery without low-hanging Edison bulbs?
Yes, exactly. And I always I'm so bad about I always just sort of think in terms of like North Conway and Lincoln in terms of like where I'm going to go after my hikes, and I do, and I'm a masshole, so I don't have like probably the geographic knowledge as a New Hampshire person would have. But I always sort of think about those two areas, but it's definitely worth it to get out to different locations, and I'm excited to go check it out, and I'm really happy that you guys were able to join us tonight. Yeah,
I appreciate it. Yeah, we're really only 10 or 15 minutes from Franconia Notch, so if you're in that area, it's not too far out of the way.
Yeah, exactly. So Stomp, you So, Stephen, I'll let you in on a little secret here. So I usually will drink beer on these shows, and then Stomp is like, he doesn't like IPAs, and he's always drinking margaritas. So, but he seems like he likes the stout. But like, can you sell him to try another IPA? Like he got sick on an IPA when he was like a young person, and he doesn't want to try one. But
it's true.
We got to get him into IPA somehow. What's the advice for converting him?
Yeah, I'm really gonna let the beer speak for itself. Stomp, I'm gonna do my best to get you some Clouded Judgment. We brew that specifically to be sweeter rather than bitter.
Yeah.
A lot of these big hoppy IPAs, they kind of stick to your tongue, and it doesn't feel very good if you don't like that bitter taste. But we try to utilize the hop in a different way, where it's sweeter and fruity instead of bitter and piney.
Mm-hmm.
So I have a question. I'm curious, and I don't really know. Sometimes I've had double IPAs, and sometimes I haven't. Is a double IPA going to typically be more that bitter taste, or does it matter? Are there other factors that matter there?
Well, usually a double IPA refers to the alcohol content. So in order to make the higher alcohol more palatable, you'll use more hops to balance out the flavor.
Okay.
So instead of drinking, something that tastes really really alcoholic, it'll be a little bit more balanced. It'll have some more hop flavor in it. So yes, it usually has more hop flavor. It doesn't necessarily need to be bitter hop flavor.
Yeah, because I like the smoother IPAs, and I don't like as much bitter, although I'm getting used to it. But I'm trying to... What should I look for if I'm looking for a smoother IPA? Are there any advertising tricks that you can figure out, or you just have to try them and see?
If it's advertised as a New England IPA, then it's probably going to be less bitter.
Okay.
Like a West Coast IPA is usually something that's going to be a little bit more bitter, but the New England style, we try to give it a bigger mouthfeel and a sweeter flavor.
Okay. And then for Rek-Lis brands, would you? I know you had said one, but what are your recommendations for IPA?
Yeah, it's really, for me, it's tough to beat Clouded Judgment. That's taking over as our flagship. We also have Pretentious Hopper, which used to be the top dog until we started brewing Clouded. So for IPAs, we've got those two that are very widely available, and then we have some other ones that you can find out in the world, but mostly they're just at the brewery.
Cool. Now, when you go hiking, when you're not obviously on duty with search and rescue, are you a Summit beer type of guy?
Yeah, I am definitely.
Yeah, this is a good time of the year for it. I haven't done a Summit beer this year yet, but I think next hike I'm gonna break one out.
Oh,
yeah, in the wintertime, I'll do like a road walk beer on the way back.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, it's a little too cold. Very cool. So yeah, Stephen, this is great. As far as the search and rescue piece of it goes, do you have anything? And I know you can't give out a lot of details on specifics about search and rescue, but are you somebody that, like Stomp will tell me, he's like, I'm just going to sit home and wait for the phone to ring because I want to do a search and rescue, or do you tend to show up on a lot of these? And if you do you have any that sort of stand out for you over the last few years that you've been involved in?
Yeah, I'm not really able to sit around and wait for them, but luckily my job is flexible enough that if I'm at work and I get my stuff done, I always have my bag on me. I'm right there in Bethlehem, just a few minutes from the notch, so I can get up and go. Or if I'm at home, as long as I haven't had a beer, I'm always willing to get up and go, whether it's 3 o'clock or 11 o'clock or somewhere in between. As far as standouts go, I mean, this week was pretty crazy.
I have one.
You have one? I want to hear.
Yeah. Well, with you and I, actually. That's worth.
I think I know what you're talking about.
Oh, yeah. Go you first.
Well, I'm going to guess that you're talking about Garfield.
No, the overnight bushwhack / search down Baker River. Like we started at, I don't know, 10, 11 o'clock at night, and there were two teams on either side of the Baker from Ravine Lodge. We had maybe 4 miles to cover, and Stephen, myself, and another individual basically just cleared the left side closest to Route 112. No, wait, that's 118?
Yeah, I don't remember, from Lincoln down towards Benton there.
Yeah, but this one moment really stands out to me. It's pitch black. We're yelling this kid's name. It's 2, 3 in the morning, and all of a sudden we come upon this ghost of a bridge that is actually running, not perpendicular, but parallel to the river. And it had, I don't know how old that thing was, but you can imagine that this old bridge must have just got washed out and just drifted down the Baker for X amount of miles or whatever. But yeah, it was really neat. That was quite a long night. Definitely saw the sunrise.
Was this the Dartmouth student?
Yep.
Oh, okay. So I want to ask Stephen a question about this one then. So when we did an episode on that show, Stomp, I don't know if it was Stomp or something, the kid disappeared, and apparently Stomp feels like you guys covered that whole area and it was impossible that you didn't see him, and he thinks that aliens abducted that kid. So I wanted to find out from you if you feel like it's possible that aliens may have abducted this kid.
That's not my theory.
Well, I heard anecdotally that he looked down at his phone, and by the time he looked back up, he was off the trail and had already, gotten himself lost. So I think it's totally possible he could have gotten sucked into his cell phone.
Nice.
And Stomp, one thing you forget to mention is that this search that we engaged on until the early hours of the morning was directly after a carryout on Welsh Dickey.
Right.
It was a super long day.
Yeah, and this is me in the confessional. I feel like I let you guys down because I was sort of like, I was just the person in, charge of that little team, but I was wiped. And by the end of it, I was just like, man, I got to get out of here, man. I don't think we're going to find this kid here or whatever. I was just exhausted. And of course, you have other members on the other side of the team, like smoking further down, like blazing it. So it was a long, tough night.
Yeah, a lot of people stayed the night in the lodge. I ended up going home. I came back the next morning, of course. But yeah, I'm right there with you, man. I mean,
it was hard.
We put a long day in on Welsh Dickey, and then we went and we really did some serious bushwhacking that night, all through the night.
And it was fairly high water, being early spring.
Yeah, I do remember. Yep, it was spring. There was a lot of runoff. Yeah, it was crazy out there. I think we tried to cross the river a couple times and we had to go around. Just couldn't do it.
Mm-hmm.
Well, you guys are heroes. I was sleeping in my bed. And Stomp, if you didn't let somebody down, you would have let me down. So just keep doing what you're doing.
Well, this is great. I do have a couple questions for you, though, Steve. We've had brief discussions over the phone about how the creative process just runs the same through everybody, whether you're an audio producer or a writer or a beer brewer. For myself, it's like I'll produce an audio clip and just refine it over and over and over again. And whether you're fine tuning the clay on a sculpture, whatever. Long story short, what is your creative process when it comes to your particular recipes for the beer?
Yeah. When I'm creating a beer, usually what I like to do is I like to start with an ingredient that interests me and build something around that. So I'll pick a style, and then I'll pick an ingredient that I like, and I'll kind of decide what complements that and how to build it out into something. So the carryout, for example, I used this roasted wheat called Midnight Wheat.
Mm-hmm.
So you don't need a whole lot of it to give it that really dark color.
How many versions of carryout did you have to create?
Ooh, that's a good question.
See, that's what I'm interested in. Yeah, that's what I'm interested in, like the refining process.
Yeah, it started out pretty close to how I wanted it. The changes were really small, and especially when you're putting out a product that's supposed to be consistent, you can't really make big changes. It's got to be really incremental.
Yeah.
So when we start out with a new recipe, no matter what it is, we brew it to the smallest capacity that we can. So we'll do like a half batch or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
Then we'll sit down as a team. We'll talk about what we like, what we don't like, and we'll figure out what we need to change. And we just go through really small changes to get to where the carryout stout is now. It's just a guess, but I think it probably took less than half a dozen, probably 4 or 5 tries to get to the point where we were really happy with it.
That's awesome.
And I think we got lucky because some of them we do more, some of them we do less.
Another question I have is just really briefly, what's the naming process? Because I love Rek-Lis's choice of names. How's that all work with you guys?
That's a good one, Stomp.
It's really we'll sit down at the end of a shift and have a beer. A lot of the time, it will be the beer that we're trying to name because I am best at naming beers when I have it in my hand. Sometimes it'll be something topical or something to do with the season that we're in. Mm-hmm. But we always try to make it fun, try to make it funny.
It's awesome.
Sometimes a little punny.
Yeah, like the whole branding is perfect. Rek-Lis. Get it in your mouth. It's consistent and it's really not provocative, but it's engaging. It's this awesome branding. I love what you guys are doing.
Yeah, we try to walk the line.
Yeah, exactly.
As far as branding goes, one thing I do want to say is something we haven't mentioned, that every time we brew, the carryout stout, we make a donation to Pemmy Search and Rescue. So if you're around and you see cans, or if you come to the brewery and you see it on tap, the more you drink it, the more we can brew it, and the more we brew it, the more we're able to donate.
Yeah, that's really fantastic.
All right. So like I said, I'm going to put the locations where you can pick up your beers across the state, and the order to the audience is to buy carry-out stout so that Pemmy Search and Rescue gets more money. So make it happen, audience.
So we'll put up all the website information, but how do we get a hold of you guys on the web?
We're pretty active on Facebook and Instagram. If you just search Rek-Lis Brewing, it's spelled phonetically, so it's Reklis.
Got it.
And that's a good place to start.
Awesome.
And we're right in downtown Bethlehem. Again, easy to find. You can't miss it.
Okay.
All right, Stomp. Next time we go hiking, you're taking me out. It's on you.
A date. It's a date?
Yeah.
All right. First date with
Really
Mike and
close to
Stomp.
Garfield and Gale.
Yeah, that's a good. So we're gonna hike Garfield and Galehead, and then hit the brewery, and you're paying. All right. Well, Stephen, thanks again so much, and we'll be talking more about Rek-Lis in future episodes. But I think we got to transition into talking to Brad next. Stomp, anything else before we close out with Stephen?
No, we're good. Steve, thank you so much. This is really good chat.
Yeah, thank you guys. It was a lot of fun. Mike, it was really nice to meet you.
Yeah, great meeting you, and hopefully we'll get out and do a little bit of hiking.
Yeah, sounds good to me.
SLASR's hiking topic of the week.
All right, Stomp. So we're here with our friend Brad here, and we brought Brad on to cover a story about a recent rescue on Franconia Falls. So I don't have a lot of detail on this one, so I think maybe if I can hand it over to you, and you can start this and then introduce Brad.
Yeah, absolutely. I really appreciate Brad coming on. Our history goes back probably to, 2017.
Yep.
If I remember correctly. I was hiking up towards the Captain with a good friend, Tom Becker, for an overnight in mid-December. And the forecast was roughly about -10 base temperature, and I had my 3-season tent. And I had a great idea to try to see if my 3-season tent could weather the conditions and everything else. And long story short, Brad happened to pass me on a snowmobile, and he after the fact sent me a message saying, "Hey, I saw you excuse me, I saw you walking up trail." And then from there I was like shameless and said, "Hey, next time maybe pick us up."
Yeah.
So that started our story of communication. I think from there he tapped into some of the EDM mixes I was doing and stuff at the time. So we've just been chatting off and on since then. So it's sort of a funny story.
Yep.
So for the audience's purposes, I don't think we've ever really talked about this, but the Captain is a peak that is between, and I don't think a lot of people know about it,
Thank
but
God.
it's a peak between the Hancocks and Carrigain. And for Stomp, it was like his white whale for like...
It is.
For what,
It
about
is.
2 years you chased that thing? So it's...
Yep.
There's no trails to it. It's like this ridiculously wooded summit, and crazy bushwhackers do it. And Stomp, what did you try to do it like 2-3 times before you made it up there?
Well, the midwinter ascent was a bailout because, my partner lost a microspike. And by the way, we should talk about Microspike actually as a trail name at some point soon.
Yep.
But moving on, yeah. So that was the first attempt, and the second attempt was a solo that I tried, and then I actually made it up to the summit by myself, single day solo, and I've gone up since another 2 times, I believe. Yeah. So it's my favorite place. It's just very remote, and it's a jigsaw puzzle of strainer brooks and dense vegetation, and it's just a blast. So if you love getting scratched up and lost, this is the place.
Yeah, I think our friends Keith and Andy hiked that recently, so we may want to get in touch with them and see if we can do a Captain segment. But anyway, Brad, that's so you were the smart one on a snowmobile in that area.
Yes, at that time.
Yeah, so I started following Brad, and he's obviously the quintessential snowmobiler. I would assume you've been all over the state, right? New Hampshire?
Yeah, I ride Vermont, New Hampshire, Maine. Yeah.
Yeah, you've got the map, the network down pat. And then what I've witnessed over the last several months is just this transition into just epic hiker and just crushing all the peaks. And the most impressive thing about that is somewhere in between me just discovering you and watching your progression was this medical situation where you've dealt with some issues. Do you want to touch upon that briefly?
Well, Stomp, before you guys get into that piece of it, Brad, I'm curious because I don't cover, I basically track all these media news stories around hikers that get injured and need rescues. But one of the things we've never talked about on the show before is that I've seen, there hasn't been a huge increase in hiker incidents over the last few years. It's stayed pretty steady, but I feel like the SUV injury in enforcement issues in New Hampshire have increased quite a bit, and I feel like the snowmobile accidents have as well. Do you have any sort of take on that about has it been an uptick in issues with snowmobiles riding around New Hampshire, or has it always been sort of a pretty common incident or situation that there's a lot of incidents?
Yeah, so I'm new to the New Hampshire area, within the last 4 years, but within the last 4 years, there's been a huge, I would think, a big uptick in accidents or violations or stuff like that, just with the different people now getting into it, not really understanding. And the rental division that, operates around Bartlett and in Twin Mountain, there's been a lot of accidents that involve those rental sleds, and that with people that ride every weekend. And it's just, you got to respect your side of the road. And that's something that I think we need to start driving home, when they rent the sled. It's just like being on a road. You need to stay on the left or the right, whatever side you're supposed to be on.
Yeah. I did I think I did one snowmobile rental with my buddies years ago up in the Forks, and one of them just flipped the snowmobile going 50, 60 miles an hour, hit a bridge, and that was it. The day was ruined, and I haven't got on one ever since. So I definitely respect them, but that's interesting. I think we'll have to have you back on when it gets a little colder, and you'll have to give us a snowmobile one-on-one lesson.
I ride a lot. I got 1,700 miles in this year, so pretty good year for the low snow we had.
Yeah, exactly.
So, back to your personal medical questions there. You're a person that deals with Crohn's colitis, correct?
Correct. Yes, I have Crohn's.
Yeah, and on your Instagram, you're labeled Crohn's Warrior, which is really cool. I latched onto that because my family members have history with that as well. So I think that's what really brought me focused on your story. That's not an easy thing to overcome and to deal with. And if you could just touch upon what you've experienced over the years, how it's impacted your athletics and your activities, that'd be fantastic.
Yeah, so I was diagnosed when I was 7, but they thought I was lactose intolerant. Mm-hmm. And really came about, they kind of a little more research, a little more, medical advancement by the time I was 11 and a half and realized what Crohn's actually was. So at 11 and a half, I was diagnosed with Crohn's. And since then, I've had surgery to remove part of my intestine, various medical drugs from, now I'm on a cancer drug that failed that they, call Humira. Mm-hmm. So I take that, and that's kind of been a huge game changer for me. It's kind of the first drug that I've had no side effects to.
Yeah.
That I can take, and has, allowed me to not get morning nauseous anymore because of the restrictions that I have inside my small intestines. Mm-hmm. And really put me into remission and allowed me to do the things I do now and train for, I'm going for my first ultra marathon.
Wow.
Out in Colorado, stuff like that.
Oh, that's fantastic.
So it's been big game changer.
Yeah, that's incredible. So when I met you, where were you? You medically, were you stable or?
Medically, I know back in 2017, I was kind of just going into what would be a really bad flare that kind of changed the direction of the treatment that the doctors, I had to get a new doctor. Because some, you have to find what works for you. And some doctors, here, this is what I use. And that same treatment doesn't work for everybody. So in 2018, I was very sick. I was back down. I lost, 20 pounds and was back to eating chicken and rice for 3 meals a day because that's the only thing my body could handle.
Right. Yeah, and that's what I've seen in my family too. That's what I noticed was your transition into hiking, and now you're just crushing it everywhere. So how was that story?
Yeah, so I was always been a hiker, but with Crohn's, like I got limited. But since the Humira has taken over and I've stopped drinking and found a diet that absolutely just works for me, and I don't vary from that. Sure, I have some Oreos at nighttime. That's not the greatest, but you got to have a cheat meal everywhere.
Right. Yeah, Oreos. You got to have the Oreos.
But yeah, so like those three things combined have essentially made it that I don't want to say I don't have Crohn's anymore because it doesn't go away, but I have no symptoms, and it's been a really fun time. Being able to go out and do 30-mile days or go with friends and just chill by the river after, a 2-mile hike, whatever, mix it up.
30-mile days of hiking or?
Yeah, some Pemis thrown in.
Nice.
Some Prezi traverses.
Okay. So yeah, we have a rescue that we want to talk about tonight, and we delayed it from a recent episode. It was dated June 28th or June 27th, actually. And you were hiking in the Pemi that day, or what were you doing exactly on that day? Sunday the 27th.
Yeah, Sunday, me and one of my friends, we were finishing up. We were doing a half Pemi and stayed out at Guyot, and then we're coming back down through the center, through that great
Owl's Head.
I want to call it just the bug infested. Oh no, on the backside, on Lincoln Wood side.
Gotcha.
So, yeah, Lincoln Brook all the way out.
Lincoln Brook, isn't that a lovely trail?
Let me just understand the route. So did you went up to the Bond Cliffs and then stayed at Guyot?
That's correct, yes.
Got it. And then came down to 13 Falls and then all the way through the center of the Pemi on Lincoln Brook.
Correct, yeah.
Did you go up on Owl's Head or did you skip it?
No, we skipped it because we had a dog with us, and it was really hot that day. So we made the smart decision to stay near the water so the dog could stay cool.
Good call.
Yeah. We're going to do another episode, but I just came back that way. I did Owl's Head via the Lincoln Slide, so that's a cool area. You don't see a lot of crowds like north of the Owl's Head Slide, so that must have been a fun little trip for you.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Lincoln Slide's awesome.
All right. So at what time of the day were you passing Franconia Falls?
It was around 2:30. We took a break there so that the dog could cool down in the stream, refill water before we get ready to walk out that great walk that is Lincoln Woods. So we were just, sitting there having a snack, and kind of all of a sudden some guy came running out of the woods saying that somebody's hurt and needs assistance. And that's kind of where it took off from there.
What happened next? Did you follow them up, or?
He came running out, and he said somebody's hurt. They have a head injury. My immediate gut reaction was grab the first aid kit, grab my beacon, and go back towards him. So I ran up. He said he was all the way at the end of the falls. So I ran up. I actually ran past him, thinking that I had to go to the end to where the pools are. But he was on what I want to call the 0.4 in, where you have that rock face that comes down. And he was there, met up with the group. His family was with him, and kind of, assessed the situation that was in front of me at that point.
Okay, so I've never been there. So this is 0.4, 0.5 off of Lincoln Woods Road?
Yeah, I think it's 0.5 because it's a little over 0.5, but the falls start happening at 0.3.
Okay.
And then it kind of turns into pools and other little, side pools.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's just a little spur trail right before the bridge to get into the wilderness area.
And it has somewhat of a reputation as being fairly dangerous, I guess.
Yeah, the rocks are super slippery there the couple times I've been during the summer.
Okay. All right.
Yeah, I mean, I think the deal with Franconia Falls is that it's not super accessible, so you can park at Lincoln Woods. It's a 3-mile hike, or a lot of people will bring like mountain bikes, and you can get to the falls. And it's a cool area, right, Brad? It's when it's not running that hot, there's plenty of spaces to sort of hang out and sit by the water, or there's a couple of natural slides where you can get into the water. So it's probably not so much a hiking destination as it is like a tourist destination. Like you'll see, like hiking down Lincoln Woods, you'll see these young people that are like, they'll be carrying their towels and flip flops, and they're coming back from Franconia Falls. So it's like, dude, you have no idea. I've been in the Pemi wilderness for all day or an overnight, and then you see these people just sort of in their rubber duckies and their towels having fun at the falls. So it is a little bit of a tourist place.
Right. Yeah, I enjoy during the wintertime. It's a fun snowshoe to go in, and then it freezes over pretty cool. And when you get the snow, it's a cool looking falls, especially up way at the end, right where you have I think the only trails end sign in all of the White Mountains that's actually posted.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. So basically they flagged you down. They say, oh, there's an injured guy. It's got a head injury. So you just basically just ran up the spur trail, and you had been already hoofing it out there from the Pemi. So when do you actually find the victim?
Once I doubled back, I went past and saw nobody else the minute you came up that crust hill, and then I doubled back, and there was a group of people around a guy that was laying down, and I was like, that's got to be him. So I yelled over and said, hey, is that guy hurt, or is he all right? And they said, yeah, he's hurt. So I made my way across the little brook that's there, and that was between me and him, and then got up and introduced myself and said who I was and what kind of experience I have on this side of the table, and assessed the whole situation, like how hurt is he, started asking him some questions, kind of ran down what I call the big four. Mm-hmm. And then, talked to his family about what happened, because he was out of it at that time. Concussion was kind of relatively right there and couldn't remember the last 10 minutes. Mm-hmm. So
what is the big four? I need to know this now.
Well, you guys probably know better, but assess the area for if there's any hazards to the people that are around him. Assess the victim for any major wounds that need treatment right away. And then I like to assess, can he squeeze my fingers? Can he wiggle his toes? Does he have any body injuries? And then assess how the family's doing, because sometimes the family actually makes it worse, in my opinion. If they're crying and all this, that he's only going to get worked up, or she's going to get worked up more. So those are the big four that I like to run down anytime I roll up to something that's like this.
So do you have certifications?
I used to be a wilderness first aid instructor.
Nice.
For the YMCA when I was younger. Mm-hmm. And then I have my wilderness first aid card. Mm-hmm. A couple of my friends are on search and rescue down in Mass, so I've always been around them and helping them out.
Awesome.
So it's kind of always been right there that, search and rescue is a thing I'm interested in. I just don't live anywhere close enough now to be part of it.
You're not alone. Yeah.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, there are a lot of people in that situation.
One other thing to point out about that particular area is there's zero cell phone connection. So there's no connectivity at all in Lincoln Woods.
Correct. Yeah. And that's why I always carry my beacon. I have an inReach, as well as most of my friends have inReaches. We find that in the whites, the inReaches actually work a little bit better than the spots. Mm-hmm. And that's the pure purpose that, 5 years ago, my mom for Christmas said, I'm getting you something that I know I can have peace of mind with when I'm out there, either snowmobiling or hiking all through New England. And I said, okay, well, after a little research and talking to my friends, they're like, the inReach is the way to go. You can text through it. So my mom ended up getting me one for Christmas, and then I've had it since, the same one. It's lasted, the 5 years through all kinds of weather, and I've never had an issue with it. It always communicates well. And, sometimes if you're on like Flume Slide.
What were you using beforehand? A spot?
Before that, it was just a cell phone. No,
okay.
Just a cell phone. One of my friends had a spot, and it was just, okay, well, if somebody gets hurt, then I used to not hike alone so much. So it was always 2 of us or 3 of us. So it's like, all right, one person stays, the other person goes out until they get some kind of service.
Well, you can't go wrong. I mean, with the earlier spots, you have just generic messages that you can send out. Boop, I made it out. I need help, whatever. InReach ups the game and lets you communicate full sentences, right? Am I correct on that?
Yeah, full sentences, whatever. Mine's linked to my phone, so whatever I type on my phone, comes back out on the InReach, and then that's what gets sent.
Okay.
This rescue at Franconia Falls went through Texas, and the other spot is Florida, to my understanding. So, because that was the last time my buddy had to use it, it went through Florida, and those are the 2 spots that even when we got back to the trailhead, that the fish and game officer was like, you're through Texas, and it's either Texas or Florida is the 2 that you go through.
Right. So once they get that information, then they can connect to you. Did that happen on this?
It did not happen on this. I spoke directly only to InReach through that conversation, and within 20 minutes, the fishing game, probably half an hour, the fishing game officer was there from the time I pushed SOS, which is about 15 minutes after I got to the victim.
Which is pretty damn quick. So let's back up a little bit. So what was going through your head, and when did you decide to send that call?
He was laying in the sun, and he passed all the tests. He could squeeze my fingers, move his toes, wasn't really complaining about neck pain, back pain, nothing like that. Once I stood him up, the minute that I stood him up, he got nauseous and really was weak on his feet. So that's when I was like, all right, we're not making it 3 miles. We're going to need to have somebody, come out here and with a side-by-side, or, maybe we could get him across the river, because you can drive the other side if a side-by-side isn't available. But I know normally they're always there. So that's when I decided to push, because we made it about 100 yards before he started to have some other symptoms. So I was like, it's time to push. So that's when I hit the button.
And this was he wasn't so much a normal hiker. He was more of a tourist, just enjoying the falls. Is that?
That's correct. Yes. Yeah. He was just out there just to swim in the pools and, relax for the day.
Wow. So they showed up pretty quick. Now, what did the rescue team show up with? Did they have an ATV or a litter? I mean,
at first it was just the fish and game officer, and then I want to say he's the caretaker for Franconia Falls tent site.
Yeah, came
over, and then once we made contact, he radioed back to the chief at the parking lot and said, we're going to need the side by side, and that side by side was already in the parking lot, and he came out. So by the time that we made it to the bridge on Lincoln Woods, that side by side was sitting there, and we were able to put the patient into the side by side, and they took off towards the parking lot.
End of story. Yeah, I mean, they happen quick, especially when it comes to a head injury. It's like you want to make things happen fast. So that's a really neat story. You got the message out quick. You responded quickly. Your previous experience really honed you into the situation and what had to be done. We had conversations behind the scenes about your thoughts about InReach, and I've had conversations about InReach versus Spot and, other means of communications. And I just wanted to get a gauge of what percentage of people out there might be using InReach at the moment. I mean, for some folks, it may be cost prohibitive, but what was your percentage take on how many people are using these devices out there at the moment?
I mean, if you just look, I think if you look at the whites, and you kind of hold that to New England, I think it's a lot smaller number. I'd only say like maybe 5% based on, you always kind of see them now that you have one. Mm-hmm. You kind of always see them when they're on other people's packs. Maybe some are packed away, but it's kind of something that you look for when you're walking by somebody, because they're always, up on your shoulder, so they have satellite if they're on.
Yeah, I see I was actually surprised this weekend I was out, and I think it has to do with where you go too. Is I think when people are going out to like Owl's Head and they're in the middle of the Pemmy, it's serious business because you're talking 9-10 miles away from any sort of rescue. So I saw more in reach, and I don't know, I can't tell the difference between an in reach or a spot by looking at it. I need to maybe do a little bit more homework on that. But we saw a fair number of people that had devices on their shoulders hiking this weekend. But it's when I say fair number, I'm probably like closer to the 5% Stomp. So it's not a huge number, but it was enough for me to notice that there was a few people that had them, which I see them more in the winter than I do in the summer. But I really, especially because of this show, because God forbid I ever get in a rescue, I probably need to have a beacon with me at some point. So I might just bite the bullet and buy one.
Well, Mike, somebody like you, like if you see a problem and you can't communicate immediately, you're just going to run out to the trailhead in like split seconds.
Yeah, I'll just trail run it. So
just like Chris.
But Brad, so you're from your perspective, you have an inReach, so you prefer those slightly over a spot device then?
Yeah, I mean, I have friends, pretty much. I have a core group of 5 friends that we go to the Whites almost every weekend, and 3 of us have inReaches and 1 has a spot. And, sometimes we'll communicate to each other because we might start out at different trailheads and trade keys, to the other car so that we're not double backing. And we've a couple of times now have had the inReaches always communicated. I did have one time where I was on Flume side where it took half an hour for it to go through. But it was also telling me that I was plus or minus 600 feet in elevation. So I was just not in a good area.
Yeah.
But the spots, they work. I mean, in a situation like we've only a couple of times, because when you send a text message, it sends your location. A couple of times when my friend was sending from his spot, it was actually showing him on the other side. So he was on Kingsman Ridge and it was showing that he was on top of Lafayette. So something like that was one of my determining factors, and to the getting an inReach over a spot was just a little bit more accuracy. But I mean, still, if you're going to hit SOS, they're both most likely in the White's going to make it out and allow you to be able to have that I need help now situation handled.
What other functionality did the inReach units have? Because a lot of the search and rescue teams use Garmin products, the 64ST GPS units and this and that. So do they have, maps with indications as to where satellites are? Do they have trackback, or is it just strictly communication one way, two-way?
So two-way communication. You can track yourself on it, and you can get tracked back on mine. And it also gives you your exact location at all times, your speed, just like anything else. But the big difference between like the 64 and just a normal inReach is battery life. I can run this inReach even at 5 years old for 5.5 days without it having to be recharged. So that's communicating, tracking me location, but not tracking me in the sense of sending on a map. But anytime that I turn it on, it'll tell me how fast I'm going, my coordinates, and my latitude.
Wow.
Or altitude, sorry.
That's pretty good.
Yeah. So 5.5 days. When it was new, I was getting like 12 days.
So Brad, aside from this incident where you had to help this guy out, have you had any close calls yourself with your crew of hikers?
My last close call when I was sectioning in New Hampshire, I was on the AT just doing a section with friends back in, that had to be 2012 or 11. I blew my knee out in the presidentials. And luckily there was 6 of us, so we just traded my bag down and, made it go straight. And I hobbled my way out the 2 miles to the road, and then I had somebody come pick me up.
You sucked it up. Oh,
but yeah, it was a fun 2 miles, but it was one of those times where like, you got to do what you got to do
to not get carried.
Yeah.
Exactly. That's the big joke.
Well, good for you for sucking it up. So That's good. So you've been doing this for a long time now. Do you do mostly day hikes, or are you doing a lot of overnights? So you hike on the weekends and then do overnights, or?
I do a little of everything. I've pretty much I've done the long trail as in 2 sections. I day hike, winter hike. This winter was a low snow year, so I did a lot of winter hiking as day hikes. Done a little bit of winter camping. Not really my thing. It's a little cold. But
-10 that day. You drove by me. God.
Yeah. No, I mean, I want to get into it, but I just I wanted somebody to show me the ins and outs of winter hiking, and not just here's the gear. Let's go in the woods in a -20-degree day and freeze.
Yeah. We'll take you up to the Randolph Mountain Club. We'll take you up to Grey Knob or the Crag Camp or something. That's the way to do the winter hiking.
Yeah. If you're staying in a camp, it's nice. We did Katahdin this year, and that was awesome as a winter, hiking into Dacey, and then
you did,
and then going up. But when you have a cabin, me and my buddies used to do that all through high school and then college. So that was a fun time. But getting in the tent is where I want to try that once or twice, on the warmer days or warmer winter days.
Oh my God, it's crazy.
Yeah, there's nothing like being in a tent in -10-degree weather.
Yeah, it's pretty hardcore
to change your mind about winter hiking.
Yeah, once is enough.
Yeah, but I do a lot of day hikes too. I mean, it's just, I like to mix it up. I don't like every weekend, all right, I'm going to go backpacking, or every weekend I'm just doing a day hike. I like to, backpack one weekend, day hike the next weekend, and just mix in different people, or stay with my, same trail family as we've all became over the last year and a half.
Nice. And then you're training for an ultra marathon. Where's that?
Colorado in August.
Man, that's epic.
How many miles?
It's going to be 50.
50. What are you doing for weekly miles right now to train for it?
Right now, because of my work schedule, not what I should be, but I'm trying to squeeze it in. Right now, I'm probably somewhere around 80 miles a week. 2 long runs.
Oh, you'll be all set. 80 miles a week. That's insanity.
I just bought a Breathe mask because I'm not used to because we're going to be at 10,000 at one point for elevation. So I just put that on and I went for a run. Was it 2 nights ago? Not good.
So what's the name of the race?
What is it? It's part of the Hard Rock series.
Okay.
But it's the amateur one.
All right.
So my buddy signed me up, and he's just like, "You're coming." And
dude.
I'm like, "You're faster than I am. You'll be fine."
That's some thin air up there, man. Have fun. It's good stuff.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Have you done any of the races around the Whites, like the Chicora or Kilkenny Ridge, or any of those?
I haven't done it as in the sense of actually on race day,
okay.
But I've done a couple Pemis for time, stuff like that. Kenny, I've done Chicora for time, stuff like that. And, it is what, I just like to go out there and have fun. I'm not so much obsessed about with the time, I got this done in this time. But, when you come back and you look at your watch and you're a day later, you're like, that's an awesome time. You feel good about it, but I'm not obsessed with the time. It's just, I'm out there to have fun.
Awesome.
Yeah, well, pretty soon you'll be old like me and you'll slow down significantly and it gets depressing. So enjoy it while you can. So with the Crohn's disease, do you feel like the cardio workout and then the dialing in your diet, that's basically been what's caused you to sort of push it to the, I guess, not being as critical as it was previously?
Yeah, I think it's more of the diet, and then listening to my body when, it might be a train day that says 10 miles, but at mile 5, I'm, not feeling it. Or mile 2.5, I don't feel it there. So I just cut it back to 5, and turn around. It's that's what's really been kind of the, ups and downs. We all have our good and bad days, and you just got to listen to your body when you're going through those motions, and kind of when you're in that training phase, that just because today says 10 miles doesn't mean you have to go out and do 10 miles. Mm-hmm. Just move the regimen around a little bit and find what works for you.
Yeah, that's pretty much what I've noticed in my family too. It's all about diet. It's amazing how much it impacts the condition.
And
Now,
everybody's
is the
different.
diet, is it like yeah. Oh, so everyone's different. That was what I was going to ask you, is like, is the diet that you're using, is it applicable to anybody else that's listening that may have Crohn's, or do you want to kind of give a quick overview on what that may be, so in case they want to experiment a little?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I like to share the information that I have, and if anybody wants to reach out, they can too. But on the diet side, like I said, everybody's different, and because of where my Crohn's is, I don't digest fats well, so I have to eat a lower fat diet. Some people can, eat bacon and be fine, and I can't. I stay away from fatty foods. I eat a lot of chicken, a lot of ground turkey. I eat avocado so that I get the good
Fats.
fats on that side. But a lot of people can't do that. I can't do eggs no matter how I try. It's kind of like that. So, you wake up, I always start the day off with something bland, whether I'm feeling good or not. So it's just toast in the morning, and then eating smaller meals is a big contributing factor to, I think, helping Crohn's. Not just eating 3 meals a day. I want to say right now, because of my training, guaranteed 6 meals a day that are on the smaller portion side.
Yeah.
But I'm eating somewhere between 5,000 to 6,000 calories a day.
Wow.
So,
Well, you're running 80 miles a week, so yeah, that makes sense.
And because where my Crohn's is where you get a lot of your final vitamins intake. So I take supplements, vitamin D, vitamin B12, iron. Especially people that have Crohn's need to really watch their iron levels, because we might be bleeding inside and we don't know it,
right,
and stuff like that. So it's kind of it's one of those things that you constantly. I go every 3 weeks now and get blood work done, full workups, just because of the Humira that I'm on, and then also my training. My doctor wants to constantly watch blood levels, whatever's going on with my liver. Because I lost 30% of my liver from a medicine that I was on in 2018, and that's why I was so sick.
Yeah. Where are you going from treatment?
Right now, I am at Brigham Williams in Boston.
Oh, nice.
I was at Leahy, but my doctor moved,
Yeah.
so I followed her to the new spot.
Yeah. Okay, cool. Awesome. Yeah, that's Leahy was where my family went.
Yeah, Leahy's awesome.
Stomp, can I just say that I would be screwed if I had Crohn's, because I love bacon, and I'm one of those people that doesn't eat anything all day and then just gorges myself at dinner. So I might not do too well.
Everything Brad's saying is eggs. I have a lot of food sensitivities and just lactose, the whole thing. I'm thinking to myself, oh my God. But diet is everything. It really is. I have one other question. Tell me about alcohol. Did you used to drink? Do you drink now? What happened there?
Honestly, 3 years ago, back in 2018 when I was having that flare, before that, I'd come home and have wine or have, a couple beers or, some mixed drinks. And the next morning I just never felt right. And back when I came after that flare, I was like, this probably wasn't helping my situation. So after that, I just quit, and I haven't had any since in 3 years. August will be 3 years. And I think it just goes back to the diet. It's just all about what you put in your body, about what you're going to get out of it.
Yeah. Pretty simple. Yeah. Sorry if I was a little intrusive, but it's just really fascinating.
No, I mean, somebody might be listening and, hear it and say, maybe I'll try that and do 6 months of it and realize that, hey, they feel 100 times better.
Yeah. Your body is very smart.
It.
Yeah. It's going to tell you what you need and what you shouldn't do if you're listening. Yeah. So that's fantastic, man. Good for you. I'm really impressed. Cool story.
Yeah. And thanks for stepping in and helping that guy. I'm sure the family was probably freaking out. There wasn't anybody else besides you and your friend? Nobody else didn't have their shit together? You were the only one that had to come in and take control of that thing?
There was one other guy that was there when I first arrived, that he was just a day hiker, and he had all the supplies that you would need other than a beacon. Everything that he could have got, anything you could have needed, he had in that bag. And he was just downstream, and when the mother of the victim was yelling, he kind of came up and said, hey, but, it was more of just like, what do you want to do? He kind of let me, once I came in, take the reins of that. And, and we had a good conversation, and we talked back and forth about, whether we wanted to stand him up and say, let's walk him, out to Franconia now, because then right as the side-by-side gets there, he'll be waiting there and it'll be a quick turn. And, because he was throwing up so much, I was just like, let's just let Fish and Game make that call. And, once Fish and Game got there, he asked a couple of questions. It was like, all right, we're going to walk you out. And Fish and Game got one side, I got the other, and we walked him out to Franconia. But yeah, there was one other guy. Everybody else there was, like you said, flip-flops, towels, and a basketball backpack that's a drawstring with maybe a little water in it. So nobody else really there even knew what was going on.
Yeah.
You're a hero, Brad.
Yep, no question.
I won't say that.
Yes. Yeah. You did great. You did great.
No, good work, kid.
You've convinced me. So I have been resisting getting the inReach, but I do think, and as a matter of fact, as I was hiking through the middle of the Pemi and into Lincoln Woods, I was thinking about like where there was 4 of us, and I'll do more detail on this hike in another episode. But we were working without a net. We were in the middle of the Pemi wilderness with no way to communicate to anybody. So I do think that like at this point, I'm going to go shopping for probably an inReach at this point.
Yeah, especially if you're on that slide, because that slide moves a lot. That's probably one of the most that slide probably moves more than any slide in the whites, I think. From the couple times I've been on it, it's never been the same the 2 times I've been on it, or 3 times I've been on it.
Yeah, the Lincoln slide. It's like sand surfing.
That's crazy. Here's a question for you guys. Ready? Map, compass, warm clothing, extra food and water, flashlight, headlamp, matches, first aid, repair kit, whistle, rain, wind jacket, pocket knife. Is something missing? Is something missing?
I think there's 2 things. I would say there's 2 things missing. So number 1 is a splint. Given the amount of lower leg injuries that we see, I would say that everybody should be carrying a splint. But I don't know what the other one is you're thinking.
Well, I'm thinking communication. I mean, what if people had the ability to say, hey, generic message via a spot, or, something more advanced like an inReach? I mean, is that something that's necessary? I don't know.
Yeah, and it's
useful. Obviously, look at this situation when you have if it's a head injury or something more medically serious and you need quick response. If you don't have something in your pack that's going to communicate quick, cell phones are not great. You're wasting time.
What percentage of your calls are they almost all cell phone based, or is there a pretty good following now between Spot and inReach for when somebody does need a rescue that they're contacting you through?
I get a lot of secondhand information. A lot of these calls go through 911 and then get directed to Fish and Game. So I think, my impression, I can't say this for a certainty, but I think it's mostly cell phone calls.
Yeah, your comment before about winter, and seeing more in the winter is definitely true. And I think it's just because the people that are out during the winter aren't as many just day hikers that are coming up. You have to have more gear for winter. So it kind of, brings in just a certain clientele to the mountains that is a little bit more, knows what the situation that has to come through and knows what gear that they need to have in order to, make it, I don't want to say make it out, but complete the loop or complete the hike for the day.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I say in the winter the stakes are higher, and you're right. Like the person that's going to go out in the winter has probably got some experience, but I think I'm just thinking through my own sort of progression with hiking. Like for a lot of years, I was just doing day hikes, and I would be pretty close to areas where I would have some level of cell phone connectivity. So I didn't really worry so much about the inReach. But now that I'm going, like over the last couple of years, like I've gone to sections where like, I'm up in the Moosilauke range, I'm up in Nash Stream Forest, I'm in the middle of the Pemi, I'm going to sections of the AT, like Mount Cube and that area there where you have miles and miles of no cell phone connectivity. That's when you start thinking about like, okay, maybe I do need the beacon because I'm sort of extending these areas where I'm really out of any level of connectivity over a cell phone. So that's where I think you can kind of get away with the cell phone reliance in the day hiking world when you're sticking close to the 4,000 footers. But once you start really getting deep into the Pemi or exploring these other cool areas, then I think that's where you really want to start thinking about getting a beacon. And that's why I'm thinking like it's time for me to buy a new toy.
Yeah. Me and my friends always laugh now because West Bond was kind of the bonds were always kind of one of those peaks that you never got cell service. And then 2 years ago, all of a sudden, now you get full service out on West Bond. And you're like, I'm in the middle of the Pemi. How am I getting full service right now?
Yeah, I know. When I hiked Garfield this winter, I had connectivity the whole time, and I was surprised. But no, very, very cool story, Brad. So any other questions, Stomp? We cover everything here?
I think it's good. I mean, does this experience change the way you go about things, Brad, or any learning moments or what?
No. I mean, it was nice to be able to help somebody in need and have a device that was able to, get them out faster than one of us having to go for a 3-mile run at the end of the day.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Out all the way out. And, it was a good situation for everybody involved, I think. He got to the trailhead faster and got out. And, I still carry my InReach and I still have the same first aid bag that goes whether I'm going for a day hike or going for 5-day backpack.
Mike, I think we have an A+ student right here.
We do. He's a hero and a someone to look up to. So very good. But we'll put your Instagram info on the show notes, and then I'll try to get the race info that you're running, and I want to just sort of link in the show notes, and we can follow you and see what your results are.
Okay.
Backcountry
but yeah, thank
Brad.
you so much for taking the time. And Stomp, I can't believe you never told me about this guy before.
Oh, this kid rocks. I mean, well, he's a secret.
I like to fly under the radar.
Right. Yeah. No, he's super impressive. I mean, they're like a handful of people I watch, and this dude was like trying to set me up with a snowmo ride, and I was like, yeah, I got to follow this kid. I never took him up on it, but then I watched his story progress. I'm like, damn, this kid, he means business, He's awesome. So, and he showed his true colors.
80 miles a week, that's insanity. So you better win this race, Brad. I'm going to be looking at the results.
How old are you?
30.
Oh, that's crushing me.
Prime of your life, man. Prime of your life. I remember those days.
You look like you're in your mid-20s.
I gotta go probably 5 more years, and then I'll be like, all right, I'm done with this. I'm just gonna backpack from now on.
Cool.
Thank you for listening. If you enjoyed the show, you can subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen to podcasts. If you want to learn more about the topics covered on today's show, please check out the show notes and safety information on SLASRpodcast.com. That's SLASR podcast.com. You can also follow the show on Facebook and Instagram. We hope you'll join us next week for another great show. Until next time, on behalf of Mike and Stomp, get out there and crush some peaks.
Now covered in scratches, blisters, and bug bites, Chris Staff wanted to complete his most challenging day hike ever.
Fish and Game officers say the hiker from Florida activated an emergency beacon yesterday morning. He was hiking along the Appalachian Trail when the weather started to get worse. Officials say the snow was piled up to 3 feet in some spots, and there was a wind chill of -1 degree.
And there's 3 words that describe this race. Do we all know what they are? Only one hill!
Lieutenant James Neeland, New Hampshire Fish and Game. Lieutenant, thanks for being with us today.
Thanks for having me.
What are some of the most common mistakes you see people make when they're heading out on the trails to hike here in New Hampshire?
It seems to me the most common is being unprepared, and I think if they just simply visited hikesafe.com and got a list of the 10 essential items and had those in their packs, they probably would have no need to ever call us at all.